Well, good morning, everybody. You know, in most of my forecast videos for the last month or so, we've just begun with satellite data because of the depth of the convection that's been firing across the United States. I always just find it fascinating to look at it from this perspective. And so we can see what was going on last night. We've had day 3 of this low curling heavy precipitation into parts of Montana, including snow at relatively low elevation. Following the main frontal boundary right in through here, we can see some deeper storms that got into South Dakota, parts of Minnesota and Iowa, but then the deepest of the convection followed 2 frontal boundaries, one that stretched right down here into this part of Texas, and then the other one. Remember, we talked about that deformation that was going on in yesterday's video report. We're keeping a close eye on some of the really intense convection that rolled right in through this area. The storms also hit parts of the Carolinas. Again, just look at how strong these were coming through parts of North and South Carolina. If we just kind of zoom in quickly, though, on the Mid-South, I just wanted to point out one thing. Right here at the end of this animation, just as the sun is setting, you can kind of get the full idea on the depth of some of these storms, punching deep into the stratosphere with their overshooting tops. And remember, every time you see these little bubbly tops on them, that's just a good indication of how powerful the updrafts are. So this was just yesterday, and if you look at yesterday's storm reports, we added another almost 600 reports to this, including 350 reports of large hail, and the hail category is certainly catching up here lately, pushing us closer and closer to the average. In fact, let's go look that up real quick. The website I used to do this is WCM. It's there it is. This is the Storm Prediction Center's kind of summary page where they keep all of their content. So I'm going to show you this. Sorry if that's making you a bit dizzy, but I'm going to here we go. So where are we right now? Tornadoes running above average at 639 versus 566, but this only has data through May 7. The hail reports, yeah, we were below, just a hair below, but wind reports were above. So they update this page, but the one I really like looking at is this one. This would be the 2024 preliminary reports, and this one is current. It's up through May the 8th, I believe. No, May 9th. It's got data on it through May 9th. So they've included the latest reports. So let's go in there and have a look at tornadoes. You can actually click around and see this. In fact, I'll link this in the notes below so you can access it. Here's our tornado reports at 670. Our hail reports right now at 1980. So they've got 1,980, which would mean if we come back here, including the most recent reports, we're now above this. We're above average on hail reports. Sorry about that confusion. And then they also color code this according to size. And then here's winds. Wind is our most prolific type of severe thunderstorm hazard in the United States. And you can see we're already over 3,000 reports so far. So I just wanted to bring your attention to some of these longer-term stats we've been paying attention to. Okay, snow-wise, the backside of this system at not very high elevation has put down snow in parts of Montana, but kind of along the spine of the Rockies and also including the Cascades, we've picked up some snow out of the depth of this low that's sitting in this area. But to come back to the total rainfall, this is the last 7 days all stitched together. And one of the bigger questions we have about this pattern is, does it really break away from this, right? We know that there's this potential for ridging to move into the western United States to stop the flow that's been coming down and then ejecting across the country like this. But we have to ask, is that ridge going to fail in its permanence in the west, or is there going to be something that sticks around for a while, giving us an entirely different look? Because if I remove everything below below an inch, you can now see where the really, really wet conditions have spread across the country. In some places we've had, down here in this part of Texas, this just added to what had already been an extremely wet month. We've got places in Texas that are more than 10 times the normal precipitation compared to average here. Now, the most recent storms, of course, the ones that rolled through yesterday into this part of Missouri, Illinois, Kentucky, and Tennessee, and also into the Carolinas, they dumped quite a bit of precipitation as well. And just kind of zooming in here, we did have a couple of areas that, look at the numbers here, over 7 inches of rain here, and some places right here along the border between Tennessee and Kentucky picking up what could be more than 7 inches of total precip. Around it, a lot of 3 to 4 to 5 inches fell out of this system. And as we just think about it, we're watching flooding in several different places around the world. And just to kind of give you an idea on what these folks just experienced, we know that down here into parts of like Rio Grande do Sul, once this comes up, that there are places down here that have received over 25 inches of rain. Now, where you are in the world, let's just go have a look here real quick. So there's Brazil, and Brazil comes down to Uruguay, which is here. There's Paraguay and Argentina. I'm zooming in on the state of Rio Grande do Sul, and I want to show you right here how the flooding along the river system has now gotten into the city. And you can see kind of the runoff and the silt that's getting out here into this bay. We also have flooding farther to the south. If I were to take you back, the Paraná River runs through here, and the Paraná River eventually comes down. Let me zoom out a bit. Right here, and sorry, it sneaks out right over here. If I go back to May 2nd, there you go. You can see where that river comes into Buenos Aires. And also take a look at all of the silt coming out here from the washout of these rivers as they flood. Nearly everywhere else north of this, nothing. There's just been nothing. Like, look, you can see the influence here of high pressure. Kind of see the flow. Remember, high pressure goes counterclockwise in the southern hemisphere, so just not a lot of precip out of that. Okay, we'll finish up with Brazil at the very end. And by the way, the stripe that you see of missing data, this is a polar orbiting satellite, so it only collects stripes of data each day. Back to the United States. Since this pattern really got active, we've seen places in here in kind of single-digit ranks, meaning that this is like the top 10 wettest such stretch of days from late April to early May, going back to 1893. There's some interesting news with this. We will start to dry out here. I think the western Corn Belt's about to get a break. There's going to be a low that cuts itself off over Arizona, which could start to bring in moisture into this area. We have heavy rains and storms continuing down here, which is going to be a problem for this region in Texas, which is currently having its wettest such time period on record. But there's better moisture coming up the East Coast to kind of beat back some drought issues as well. West, you're going to go dry. We're going to see some dry conditions coming in here. All right, real quick, though, to keep on this idea of where the heavy rains have been, I wanted to give you an update on where we've got our rivers that are in action or minor, moderate, or major flood stages. We're just going to kind of keep tabs on this as we roll through this month of May. And I want to look at the latest soil moisture maps. Now, this goes only down to 16 inches or 40 centimeters, but it is to point out that there's, honestly, across the United States, a whole lot more saturated soil than dry. Now, that is not to take anything away from these regions, but there's going to be some significant improvement here soon. And we're going to watch this low that's going to start to draw moisture into this part of the southern and western plains, which will be critical. Montana, you're going to get a chance to dry out too after what's been a really, really wet last 3 days. Okay, early this morning, where our ongoing storms continue to press through, we're just watching here. This is going to wrap out right around 7 a.m. And you can see the heavy rains that rolled through this area. And this morning, we still have storms in that region. So a lot of active storms that stretch from parts of Arkansas, really more toward northern Mississippi, Tennessee, straight across here over towards South Carolina. A few storms continue in northern Illinois, and there's even some thunder over here in this part of South Dakota as well. But all hazards weather map, let's get an update on this. This is what I've got early this morning. Still watching flooding issues here. We've got a tornado watch to the south of this. We have frost risk here, snow and frost here. And after this, though, I think we get a much different look. And that different look is complements of this pattern. Now, here's the big story. This is the ridge we've been talking about. This is one that's out ahead of it. The two of them are combining to leave a cutoff low there. And that's going to have to move across the country. How far to the north it makes it or how far to the south it stays will be critical to understand who gets the wet weather and who doesn't. The other piece to this puzzle is, does this ridging stay around for a while, or does it actually just fade and go back to the pattern we've been in? That's the big questions we're going to try to answer as we slide through these next few tabs here. So on the severe weather side of it today, from eastern Texas, central eastern Texas, over to parts of Georgia and South Carolina, enhanced risk. And that's where the front sags later today. We then see into tomorrow that it's going to primarily stay into this area. This will be on Friday the 10th. And then getting into Saturday the 11th, finally a bit of a different look overall in the pattern. But what's going on Saturday is there'll be this low that lives here. And it's going to start to draw some moisture as a weak frontal boundary sneaks into the eastern Corn Belt. So let's kind of take a look at how this all unfolds. Picking this up about 9 o'clock this morning on Thursday, we're going to watch the high-res NAM kind of give us the pieces here. So throughout the day today into tonight, I know it's not showing up as widespread on the high-res NAM, but there will be storms in this region tonight. And the unfortunate part of it is hitting this area with more rain is just adding insult to injury given how much flooding we've had. To the north, we have some scattered precipitation that's moving out of the kind of the ice states here toward the northeast. And then the colder air running down the spine of the Rockies here. We still have the snow threat at elevation and some cold rain down here in the foothills. But as we get into Friday, this is now midday Friday, getting into Friday afternoon and evening, there's the front I mentioned that comes through the eastern Corn Belt by Saturday, and that upper level low is taking shape right here. So as rain moves through the mid-Atlantic, front follows it, upper level low becomes established in the west. And here we go. This is through Saturday midday. Now by midday Saturday, how far back we're able to pull this moisture will be critical to assessing where we can beat back the risk of drought in this area. So given all of that, let me show you where I think this next 10 days is going to go. The west going over drier thanks to the ridging. This cutoff low drawing moisture in here. We're going to watch this low move across the country, but before it does it, it's going to leave a lingering frontal boundary here that's going to give us a severe weather. Could we open up some windows in this area? Possibly. The models are not in agreement overall about this pattern, though, and I'm going to get in and have a good discussion about that. So here's what my forecast is really hinging on. Since that time period, April 21st till recently, we've had ridging north of Hawaii and weak ridging here over the southeast, very weak ridging over the southeast. But the ridging north of Hawaii has been critical to getting the storm systems to dive into the west. And then just follow the flow. They eject. And that's that check mark flow. If this ridge would have been bigger, I would be worried about it lasting longer, drought risk in the southeast growing. But as you just saw, we're expecting a lot of wet weather there, which means it is capable of breaking down. Big question for me is, does the ridge push its way toward the west, where it is right now, or does it retreat and come back to where it's been? And if persistence wins the day, it retreats, and we get right back into this pattern, and we just close off any sort of a window for getting wide open planting windows. If it advances and progresses, the whole pattern begins to shift. So given that, let's now look at those upper level winds. Here we are on Thursday getting into Friday and Saturday, so there's our little cutoff. It's not much to see here, but it's going to get pulled this weekend toward the east where there is going to be some cooler air in this broader trough. As we work out there to Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, there's the ridge I'm watching. See it? There's the subtropical jet underneath. And there is a weaker trough coming through midweek, which is going to give us some unsettled weather, kind of in this broad area. But as we play forward, I want to know if we work our way into this pattern. So weak flow coming in the west, but see that? That's northwest flow. That's a drier signal in this area. And that's an area that needs a drier signal to plant a crop. So keep that stuffed away in the back of your mind as we start to walk through these models. Here's the new artificial intelligence forecast for the next 7 days. Very wet here and up the East Coast. But do you see the drier signal beginning to show up, kind of pushing through this area? This is mostly coming from in the very near term, except for when the upper level low comes out and brings in some of this moisture here this weekend. Let's go from the artificial intelligence to the WPC. Really wet conditions down here. WPC is forecasting some places to pick up 2 to 3 inches of rain just in the next 7 days. The NBM is similar, but one of the models the NBM gives a lot of weight to is the GFS. That's the U.S. model, and it's got quite a bit of precipitation over Iowa. I'll give you some details on that in a second. This is what the European model is saying. Much different scenario than the NBM in terms of where those heavy precip totals were. And this is the GFS. So now can you see it? If we compare the Euro to the GFS, notice how much drier the European model is in this scenario. This shows us where the GFS is wetter. This is where the European's wetter. So the European's wetter along the Gulf Coast. The GFS is a bit wetter in the interior. And the European has more moisture getting pulled back from this upper level low into some of these dry spots here in the southern plains. Both models are wet going into New England, but the European model is wetter here as well. Okay, so probability-wise, best chance at an inch over the next 10 days. Now remember, this is the 0-0 run, meaning it includes some of last night's precipitation here and here. But this is where we have our best chance of an inch. Here's the best chance at 2 inches. Very wet conditions here and along the spine of the Appalachian Mountains. On the drier side of it, this is what the western region can do. Bring in a drier bit of air into this whole region that could use some drier air to finish planting a crop. So with all of that, let's go actually see what the models are saying. GFS left, European right. I'm going to focus more on the European in this forecast. It's got the higher skill score right now. So through Friday into Saturday. Now, remember, by Saturday, we have the upper level low here, the frontal boundary that's going to sneak through into this direction. So here we are, Sunday, playing forward. Now watch where that low comes out. And I'm watching this carefully right here. Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas. As this pulls out, how much more moisture does it bring to the Mid-South? Where does that frontal boundary linger, and how much rain do we get into parts of Missouri coming out of eastern Kansas, which has been hit hard with hail and heavy rains? Right along this area, do we see more moisture in this region or not? As we play it forward, there is a weak system next Thursday that sneaks through, comes out of the upper Midwest, the northern plains, and gets right in through here. But take a look at Texas again. The European model is trying to bring that moisture back into western Texas. And then the question is, as we get into this pattern, do we really finally get a sense of some drier air? And the models don't agree. I've got the CPC on the left, I have the European in the middle, and I have the GFS on the right. And the GFS just keeps stormier weather around. The European's got this look, and you can see how much drier it is kind of pushing into this area. I apologize. It appears that my mail client needs me to do some serious updating right now, so I apologize that bounces around for you for a few moments here, but this is what I'll keep a close eye on. All right, what about the temperature side of this? This is the cold air this morning. It's going to continue to sink south, but our frost risk this morning is primarily here, and as we get into tomorrow morning, that's what we're going to be seeing in this area. But these temperatures really moderate quite a bit. Watch. Thursday into Friday, there's that cold air. Look at the cool air moving here. But by Saturday into Sunday, we start to see this moving east and kind of fading. And look at the warmth that comes in moderating this behind this. There's Monday into Tuesday and Wednesday of next week. Now, you know that next week, okay, we have that last system, the weaker trough that comes through, bringing in a little bit of cooler air here. But I don't see any major risk of a late frost this year. It's just not in the works. Instead, we're picking up some valuable heat. For the first time in a while, we had numbers last week on this map that were down in the 30s in terms of accumulating GDDs in Yakima. Now we're at 116. That's what a ridge can do. Look at the Central Valley of California. If you could plant a crop today, in 7 days it'd be fully emerged in St. Louis. This is some cool air now, but warmer air is going to replace it soon. It's quite hot across the south, as we've been discussing. Now the GFS says day 5 through 10 looks something like this. And day 10 through 15, again, no major signals for significant cold air. But I want you to note the difference between the depth of the cooler air from the GFS and what the European is showing. Because the European model shows much cooler air sitting over the southeast. And why this is important is this suggests jet stream flow that does this. And you noted that the European model was the drier model in this whole region, right? And that was because of the depth of the trough over the southeast driving in that cooler, drier air, not cooler, but drier air out of the northwest. The GFS doesn't have the same solution. So it's a different look. All right. To finish this up, I want to give you some longer range model updates. We're going to go out here and we're going to look at the time period of the 12th of May through the 12th of June. And there's been a significant change, and I've kind of harped on this all week, but this is what it is. See where these brightest kind of warm colors are? In the last few days' runs, I'm going to go back to just yesterday. These represent pressure anomalies. If I can get this to load here, what's important to understand is that recently these pressure anomalies were greater here. For some reason, I must have lost my internet connection. I'm so sorry. But these were greater in this area, and now they're not. It's kind of completely moved. And what's important about that is what it's done to precipitation. Let's see if I can still pull up a precip map here. 30-day anomaly. Let's do a quick refresh on this. Maybe weather bell went down. I'm not sure. But my whole point behind telling you this was that I'll just draw on a previous map. I apologize for that. If we do, in fact, build high pressure into this area, so I know I'm drawing on a temperature map, but just listen because for some reason weather belt has just dropped out on me. That would bring in drier air here and keep this section of the country wetter. And it would keep some more mild air in place as well. If that high pressure cell retreats, this pattern will go back to this. And we'll get into a wet scenario for the remainder of May. Now, as it stands, if we could just see what the precip doing. Is the weather belt back? I don't think it is. I think, let's try to get the weeklies up here. Yeah, I think something happened to weather belt side. I apologize for that. But as it stands, can I just take you back to, let's go back to this graphic here. This one. The wetter weather coming into this area, great. Let's bring in some drought mitigation strategy for the longer term. A little bit of drier conditions in here, not going to be necessarily a problem. Overall, the West needs more heat and dryness. And so I think, honestly, I think this upcoming pattern could be a good one for much of us across the country. But if the failure point happens and the ridge slides back north of Hawaii, then we have troubles. So I apologize. This is a bit rough that I lost the weather bell site here, but maybe we can just finish this up with a bit of an international discussion. I mentioned earlier in the video about the flooding in Rio Grande do Sul. It's still there. Over the next 5 days, we're looking at, next 10 days, we're looking at maybe upwards of 5 inches of extra precipitation. Meanwhile, Argentina's got a drier signal, and most of northern Brazil's got a drier signal as well. And the last couple things I think it'd be good to look at is kind of an international update. We still have some flooding problems south of the Yangtze, but it's slid farther and farther to the west here. You notice that we're looking at better precipitation into southern Russian wheat belt here. Better precipitation New South Wales and Queensland and Victoria. But South Australia, I got a report the other day that they are almost out of hay. The drought's been getting worse and worse in this area. Rivers are very low. That's kind of something important to keep an eye on. And finally, even though you see it quite wet in southern India, this is not yet fully a part of the Indian monsoon. That doesn't start for a couple more months. But this would be some very early season rainfall in this region. And lastly, temperatures. I just wanted to point out how cold it is in parts of north central Russia here and western Russia lately. This has been a very cold spring now in that area after some serious heat about a month ago in that same spot. There is a frost coming into Buenos Aires and Cordoba provinces down here as well over the next 7 days, and so some chilly air moving up through parts of South America. But with that, I'm going to stop, try to figure out what's going on with my computer and the internet. Hopefully I can load this video quickly for you, but we'll talk again tomorrow. Thanks.